You're the Israel guy. You're our guy, bro. And we are now well into the moment with Israel, with TPUSA, with Candace, with the Trump government, with everything. You're supposed to be out ahead of us leading the charge. So is it milking it to try to get to the bottom of the whole thing? Everyone else has gone off to fight it, and you are not there.
Ian Carroll just slammed Nick Fuentes for buying into the FBI's Charlie Kirk assassination narrative, with Ian himself very supportive of Candace Owens and her investigation of that matter. And in this clip, he gets into why he cares so much about the fact that Nick isn't siding with him on this, and that Nick has discarded the truth. So let's get into this. Let's see where it's going and what impacts it has on this story. Please like the video and subscribe to the channel.
Let's start at the start with our boy Nick Fuentes. Nick, listen. I'm going to take a lot of heat for this section of the show. Bring it on. I've been pretty outspoken in my support of Nick Fuentes. I've been pretty into Nick's rise, and regardless of disagreements about specific things that Nick says, I'm pretty much generally excited that Nick is entering the mainstream and the normal conversation. I like how Nick forces us all to challenge our ideas and forces people to think more critically about ideas that we didn't even realize we should be thinking about. I like that his ideas are controversial. I like that they're complicated and they're backed up by a intense intellect. And I like that he has the backstory of 10 years of hard work to make it happen. There's a lot of things I like about Nick. And obviously, the thing that most of us like the most about Nick is his stance on Israel, is his unwavering stance on Israel against all odds, across the years, against censorship, against everything, right? It's a real David versus Goliath story with Nick Fuentes, is how it would read. And it's hard not to root for the guy, being canceled by Ben Shapiro basically a decade ago, and now triumphantly returning at long last to squash Ben and the entire Daily Wire and all of his critics in so many ways.
Yeah, I mean, that's the ironic part of Nick Fuentes' rise, that Ben Shapiro was someone who tried to trash him something like a decade ago in like 2016 or something, over and over. This guy that had no audience at that time, and it seemed to have lit a fuse within Fuentes to build kind of a media empire and one of the biggest shows on the right now. And, I'm generally with Ian here, too. I think Nick's stance against Israel is heroic. I mean, he's very knowledgeable about that. He makes no bones about it. He's not politically correct about it. My only qualm is when he attacks the best critics of Israel, basically down the line. Almost all of them he's attacked at some point. Candace Owens, Tucker Carlson, Max Blumenthal, Cenk Uygur, Daryl Cooper, on and on and on. Almost all the good critics of Israel he has attacked for not being against Israel for the right reasons. And that's what's suspect about him. In my mind, it's not his stance on Israel, which is awesome. I'll support him on that. I often, state my overlap with him on that, but he does seem to get in feuds with basically every good critic of Israel, even on that topic. And that is what raises eyebrows.
It's a wonderful story. And I do mean all of that seriously. I'm not being sarcastic about that. But Nick, you're the Israel guy. You're our guy, bro. And we are now well into the moment with Israel, with TPUSA, with Candace, with the Trump government, with everything. And what's going on, man? Where are you at, Nick? Yeah, Nick is still doing his thing. He's still running his show. He's still being critical of Israel. But he's also doing the podcast circuit, basically running everything he can against Candace and against actual factual information. I could understand if Nick was skeptical of Candace's sources, but Nick is straight up not here. Not there for the conversation about Israel in the way I think a lot of us expect and the way I think a lot of us were ready for.
Well, here's where I'll criticize Ian. He's not obligated to stand on the same side of this issue as you are, and you can still respect him. You can respect him for other reasons. It's why single issue coalitioning is the most effective mechanism for uniting with people and pushing a cause. Nick doesn't have to have the same policy prescriptions as you. You can still admire him. You can still admire him for his stance on Israel. But if he disagrees with every aspect of this investigation, is he somehow not with you on the general topic of Israel? I don't think so. And I stand somewhere in between Nick Fuentes and Candace Owens on that investigation. I think Candace should be free to pursue leads. Why wouldn't she? We can't be trusting the FBI by default, especially what we've seen from COINTELPRO and Waco and Ruby Ridge and Jan 6 entrapment and murdering Fred Hampton and trying to get Martin Luther King to commit suicide, probably playing a role in the death of Martin Luther King. On and on and on. They're just not trustworthy. They never have been. So why shouldn't people pursue leads when the truth is likely shoved under a rug? But at the same time, I'm not with every single aspect of Candace's investigation and thinking that everything she's brought to light is where this lands, because if you do, you have to believe in, Egyptian influence in the assassination, Turning Point USA influence in the assassination, Lance Twigg influence in the assassination, Israeli influence in the assassination. To some extent, she's brought up the cell phones on site, Ukrainian influence in the assassination. I just can't believe that all of those things go together for this grand conspiracy amongst many governments and many players like that. It just doesn't make that much sense to me. But Ian, Nick doesn't have to side with you on this exact issue to be good on the issue you care about, and that's Israeli influence in the United States.
It's like arriving on the battlefield and your general is off hanging out with Steven Crowder. And it's like, what is going on, bro? Why are you doing puff pieces with Steven fucking Crowder right now, dude? This is weird. And it's weird to me. And I bet it's weird to a lot of people. It's probably weird to some of the Groypers, though I'm sure some of the Groypers will follow Nick till the end of the earth, and you do you. And I'm not here to say that Nick is a Fed. I'm not here to say that Nick is this or that. I'm not here to shit on Nick completely. But I am here to just, air out the room. Like, bro, where are you at? What's going on, dog?
All right, with the Steven Crowder thing, I'm not a fan of Steven Crowder either. I watched that entire interview, by the way, and I've already reacted to one of the segments between Crowder and Nick. I'm not a fan of him for many reasons, especially in regard to foreign policy. He's much more supportive of an interventionist foreign policy than I am, totally, and much more supportive of Israel in general, though he says I don't think the U.S. should fund them to the extent that they do, and things like that. I think he's even called for no foreign aid. But at the same time, what Ian's doing here is remarkably similar to what the Zionists did, even on the right, when they lambasted Tucker Carlson for having Nick Fuentes on his show. They said, you can't talk to this guy, it's wrong. You can't platform him. And I just think that's the wrong angle to go at if you want to criticize Nick. And Ian seems to be doing the same thing with Steven Crowder. Like, that's Nick's business. Of course he'd want to sit with a guy and talk about his views on a major platform. I don't think that's, odd whatsoever. And Ian's a good guy. I don't think that he is kind of trying to be untrustworthy in pointing this out or trying to be duplicitous or, in bad faith. But that is a similar tactic that the Zionists and Shapiro's and Levin used against Nick too.
It's time. It's happening. We're in the meme. It's happening. And you're like over there hanging out with Steven Crowder doing puff pieces. And if you don't know what I'm talking about, I'll show you. And we'll just try to reconcile this.
To be clear, at that point, I think he played a few clips, doing puff pieces with Crowder. Again, that's what the Zionists said he did with Tucker. I don't think it's, a good faith argument. Point out where you think he was wrong and don't. when you don't think he was wrong. That's what we do on this channel. That's what I try to do down the line. You know, I have overlap with Fuentes. I have a lot of disconnect with Fuentes. Ian can point that out. And I think he did to some extent. But just to say it's a puff piece isn't good enough. You have to actually get to the bottom of it. Ian does, just saying that. But why wouldn't he meet with Crowder? Like, he seems to have some animus toward him meeting with Crowder. I don't see any reason for that at all.
There is a perfectly good reason why, when this first happened, Nick might have been reticent to come out with any kind of theories because the Groypers were about to be target number one. Okay? But in fact, it was actually Candace and everyone pointing the finger at Israel and everyone starting to uncover on this exact train of thought that exonerated the Groypers. Because they all quickly dug into the case and realized that this is not Tyler Robinson. And Tyler Robinson also is not a Groyper. And so once the Groypers were exonerated, I just don't really see how that affects the conversation right now. And Nick, even if you still kind of think it might be most likely Tyler Robinson and you want to be the one that made that right call, even when everyone else made the wrong call, even so, along the way here, we have gotten so much information that absolutely obliterates the pro-Israel narrative, that absolutely exposes Israel's infiltration of Christian churches, Israel's infiltration of politics, Israel's infiltration of donor culture, of conservative Inc. And this is supposed to be your moment. This is supposed to be your rise. You're on the generational run, bro. And you have generationally run right to Steven Crowder's show to hang out with the Fed slop narrative.
Well, it's kind of ridiculous. If he watched that entire show, Nick pushes back against Crowder on a lot of what Crowder brings up in terms of his views on policy, on Israel, on foreign policy, even on the welfare state and on immigration. They talked about that a lot, with the biggest disconnect seeming to be over the welfare state. Nick favors a much bigger welfare state with public works projects. He praises the New Deal, wants to expand the welfare state, etc. So there was pushback. It wasn't like this was a hangout in which it was just a fluff fest. It so purely wasn't. And Nick can be all those things. He can be an advocate against Israel and Israeli influence over the government and just not side with you on every aspect of this investigation. And I'm not even saying I agree with him on every part of this investigation. He doesn't think, for instance, the 30-06 round sticking in Charlie's neck is at least odd. I do, though I don't think that necessarily says who the killer was, but he pointed out, and I believe it was either Bradley Martin's or Tommy G's show, that, hey, that happened to Martin Luther King. We know it can happen. It's like, yeah, but it's not really explainable when it doesn't hit bone and just lodges in cartilage. So there are things that I disagree with him on, but he doesn't have to side with that to be the same, antagonist toward Israel that he's known for. And for Ian to think that he must be obligated to side with that position, I just think's wrong-headed. And I like Ian. I've never met him personally. I walked by him at an event in which we both spoke, but I like him quite a bit. Just don't think that you need Nick on this one, man. You can be your own independent man. You have your own influence. So does Candace, so does Tucker, so does other people, some of which agree with you on this. You don't need Nick on this one, man.
For like kind of a facetious take on it. It's very confusing to a lot of us, and it's a bummer because I genuinely like you being here. I genuinely like that you challenge the conversation, and I'm genuinely impressed by what you've done with your platform and your messaging over the years. But I think a lot of creators right now are feeling the way I'm feeling and are just afraid to say it because we all know how the Groypers are. And we all know that Nick is good at holding a grudge. And that's cool. If Nick wants to hold a grudge, that's fine. I'm not stressed. But I'm just genuinely like, bro, this is your moment.
And by the way, spoiler alert, he did hold a grudge and devoted something like 20 or 25 minutes to slamming Ian Carroll for this take on his show last night. Just want to make that clear. He always holds a grudge. He'll hold grudges against anyone, even if they agree with him, like down the line on the Israel issue, because, you know, he has a different view. I think it's equally unfair for Nick to lash out against Ian as it is Ian to say that, you know, Nick is essentially obligated to be on this side of the Charlie Kirk assassination.
And you ain't here. We're all on the front lines of battle for America, to save America from this influence. This exact investigation has not only exposed Israel's grasp over organizations like TPUSA, but in the process, it has exposed reporting about Israel's grasp over Trump himself, over the White House, over American Christian churches. It's just very confusing.
Yeah, that part I'll agree more with Ian, because even if you don't believe that, you know, the grand conspiracy or Israeli involvement was, you know, in regard to the Charlie Kirk assassination, the story behind this shows a massive Zionist pressure campaign against Charlie Kirk, especially toward the end of his life, with Charlie, you know, eventually saying, "I have no choice but to leave the pro-Israel cause," in a stated text message. And Nick continues to say that Charlie Kirk was, quote, Israel's top guy. He says that all over and over. He said that again on his show last night. I watched it. He continues to say that, even though it's very clear that Charlie did turn against Israel, and he turned against it, you know, overtly, fiercely, and in text messages to close friends. And not only did he do that, he said, hey, maybe we should invite Candace Owens to our next Turning Point event in addition to Tucker Carlson. I'm sorry, that's not Israel's top guy if you're doing that. Just saying. Charlie was pro-Israel for most of his life, but not at the end, and Nick refuses to acknowledge that. I think that is suspect.
It's very confusing. And I guess the way that it seems to me is that if we're going to be winning anti-Semite of the year, it seems like you got to be on the front lines of battle, bro. And I get it. That's not why he didn't win Anti-Semite of the Year. It's because they're fucking scared of giving him a bigger platform. They know that if they give him Anti-Semite of the Year, if they even nominate him, it's just going to make him bigger. And, you know, we're just going to all celebrate it.
But couldn't you make that argument to everyone? I mean, we have to vote Miss Rachel in, by the way, because imagine the headlines, Miss Rachel, top anti-Semite of the year, for saying that I don't like it when babies are killed. That's her greatest crime. I mean, it's so ridiculous, but hey, I say vote Miss Rachel in. Absolutely absurd poll that makes Americans just laugh about how absurd this is and how anti-Semitism just means anyone I don't like now is just anti-Semitic. If you criticize Israel, or not even criticize Israel in Miss Rachel's case, you're the anti-Semite of the year, or at least a finalist.
Because everyone else is just celebrating. Stu Peters is doing a victory lap. Everyone's hyped. We're all competing for it. But Nick is just out here taking shots at Candace left and right. And it's like, I get that you've got a vendetta, but it's like, bro, what's going on here? And you're going on all the podcasts.
Just for like engagement?
I think that's a huge part of it. I think that she cares that her friend died. At the same time, this has been really good business for her. She's getting like 150,000.
She's actually pretty much been doing the same numbers as before. If you actually look at it, she's gone up maybe like a few 100,000 views per live on average, but she's been getting 2 million views on a live since long before Charlie was killed. Her Brigitte stories were doing incredible views. They were breaking the whole world.
Yeah, I agree with Ian on this. If you look at the stats, I think you'll reach the same conclusion. Same with her Epstein content was very, very highly viewed. And she's been doing huge numbers for a long time. This has, I think propelled her at least a little bit more. But at the same time, I agree with Ian on this. And yeah, I have a problem with him just continually attacking the best critics of Israel on the right. It's what causes a lot of people to view him as a Fed, is that it's not that he's disagreeing with these people on issues where they have disagreement in terms of policy, like, say, tariffs, or it might be like immigration. Maybe some of these people that are critical of Israel favor H-1Bs and some don't. He's actually attacking them on Israel where ostensibly their policy is the same, to stop aid to Israel. That's Candace Owens' prescription. That's Tucker Carlson's prescription. But he can't stop attacking them. It's why a lot of people think he's just kind of, some agent that's set to create a schism on the right, when many people on the right, many prominent people, are turning away from Israel for the first time in all of our lifetimes.
It's actually kind of a fallacy to say that she's been milking this for money. I mean, it's very understandable that she's going to follow the investigation to its end. But
viewers, millions of views on every show. She's probably making tons of money. At this point, I think she's milking it. It's been like 3 months, and every show is, this changes everything. You're not going to want to miss it.
Nick, if you were murdered, I would not stop until I figured out who the fuck did it. And I don't even know you. I've never met you. But if you were murdered today, especially if there were suspicious circumstances, especially if you had just texted your Jewish Zionist donors, which I know you don't have, but if the situation were reversed and you had been murdered, I would not stop investigating that until we figured it out and proved it.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's reasonable too, but Ian has to realize that Nick's reached a different conclusion. Right or wrong, he thinks Tyler Robinson was the sole shooter, essentially has said that. I don't even agree with that. I think there had to have been some kind of conspiracy involved, potentially, but I think that Tyler Robinson was involved too. If you want to say I'm part of the cover-up then too, and I was involved, feel free to do it, but that's my vantage point. But at the same time, Ian, he drives this in as he has to agree with Nick on this. You don't have to agree with Nick on this. Ian, you have your own influence, man. You're a huge influencer on these sorts of topics and on conspiracy topics. You don't need Nick for this one, man. You really don't.
Because it would be essential to the American conversation. It would be essential to free speech and to everyone in our positions. And if the FBI came out and there's this suspicious murder of Nick Fuentes, and the FBI comes out and is like, oh, it was this lone gunman with a gay lover, I wouldn't be buying that shit for a second.
But what about if there was, completely conclusive proof? Would you not buy it no matter what? Whether your eyes told you that? What if it was someone that killed Nick Fuentes and the FBI happened to say that too? Would you buy it then? Would you buy it if, your friend told you that I killed Nick Fuentes and you had no reason to doubt that based on all the evidence you've seen and the FBI happened to declare the same? Would you still deny it? I'm not sure. I'm not saying trust the FBI. I don't trust the FBI. They're a demonic institution that deserves to be abolished completely. But, at some point, if the FBI says the sky is blue, that wouldn't necessarily be means to doubt that. I would doubt some other things that the FBI does and says, and for sure, I don't think they're giving us the full story on this one. But just to say this, man, you're your own man. You have your own platform. You can diverge from Nick Fuentes on an issue or two.
Even if you didn't send a tweet, or a text message rather, saying, I'm afraid they're going to kill me. I have to leave the pro-Israel cause. We would all do the same for you. Or at least I would. I can't speak for everyone. So is it milking it to try to get to the bottom of the whole thing? When the story that the feds were giving was falling apart on day one. The story that the feds were giving fell apart a month before the shooting happened when Harrison Smith tweeted out that a source close to Charlie told him that Charlie was afraid that Israel was going to kill him.
Yeah, I don't think that's milking it. I think Candace has every right to explore every avenue of this. I've been supportive of her investigation, even though I don't believe that all of what she's raised is credible or plays a role in this assassination. But at the same time, he's his own man. He can come to those conclusions.
To tune in tomorrow, where she's like, I have more evidence, but I'm going to wait to release it. Why? So you can milk it for ratings? If you have evidence.
Do you remember the time when she had that one text message that everyone said she didn't have, and she got everyone to lie on Charlie's name, including Andrew Colvett most prominently. And everyone's coming out and trying to spin their own spin, and she's just waiting for all of them to put their receipts on the table. You remember that? Yeah.
Yeah, that's actually where I think Nick Fuentes is the most dishonest. He refuses to acknowledge that turn in Charlie's behavior. He doesn't even entertain the appearance that Charlie Kirk had on Megyn Kelly on August 6th, where he does complain that his integrity is being questioned because he levies minor criticisms at times about Israel, and he complained that I can't even criticize Israel as much without my long track record of support as an Israeli can, and my character's being called into question. He, his anger and frustration leapt out of the screen in that interview. And Nick doesn't acknowledge that, or the text saying he has no choice but to leave the pro-Israel cause. I mean, I think that's pretty substantial. I think that's pretty tangible and important. And to continue to say that he was Israel's #1 guy is just wrong. It's just flat wrong. This was not Ben Shapiro. This was not Mark Levin. He did have a long past supporting Israel, but he clearly had turned in the end.
Evidence, put it all out there.
Do you think then Candace is...
So, I'm just bummed, man. I'm bummed. Because this is supposed to be your moment. Like, you're supposed to be out ahead of us leading the charge. Your intellect is supposed to be here dismantling this Zionist complex, dismantling the Zionist donor base, exposing this bullshit. Because this specific issue right here, this issue is the exact example of why your point, specifically your point, that it's not just the Israeli government. It is also American Zionists, American Jewish Zionists, and this network that they have built inside of America on behalf of this foreign state, because that's what TPUSA is exactly. If there's any moment in time when America has a direct, obvious example of what you've been championing for years, it's right now with Turning Point USA. And suddenly everyone else is gone. Like, everyone else has gone off to fight it. And you are not there.
Well, Ian, I wouldn't dwell on this too much, man. Even if you have a stark contrast in opinion on it, it would seem odd if you're totally bought into this narrative that, hey, Israel played a role in this, which you do seem to continue to imply here, that, the Israel guy isn't leading the charge against it. And it's like, fair enough, you can be frustrated about that. Let's just say the guy that I probably cover in terms of his ideas the most on this channel is Dave Smith. I agree with him on almost everything. There's been a few things that I don't, but I agree with him on almost everything. And if he suddenly shifted his mindset, like on Venezuela, like he suddenly supported regime change in Venezuela, that would certainly raise my eyebrows. That would certainly be weird to me. I would think that there were inconsistencies in that for sure. But would I blast Dave and say that you've completely, abandoned any semblance of reality, even if his mindset and positions on every single other issue remain the same? I don't think I would, even though that would be weird because, he's a very consistent guy. I don't think that of Nick Fuentes. I think he's pretty erratic in what he supports. He has a lot of overlap with the American left on the welfare state, Social Security, and things like that. He, isn't particularly passionate about gun rights. He said at times that they have to be controlled to some extent in a future situation in which there is order and things like that. But at the same time, man, you don't have to side with Nick on everything. It's all right to diverge on individual topics, even if you think this is important to countering Israeli influence in the United States. And I agree with that. Pieces of this story are, especially the high-level donor pressure campaign from people like Robert Shillman and Bill Ackman and people that withheld donations to Turning Point USA because Charlie was not towing the Zionist line. That's, again, a pretty significant avenue of the story that Nick refuses to entertain. But at the same time, Ian, you can go on without him. You can side with Candace on this. You two are a brunt force alone, individually, but together, I mean, you pull a lot of the conservative kind of right-leaning market on this stuff too. So I don't think you need Nick. I don't think he's obligated to have the same position as you on this, even though I don't have Nick's position on this. But that's just what I think. I want to hear what you guys think. Let me know in the comments down below. Is Nick Fuentes right about this? Is Ian Carroll right about this? Should Nick be leading the charge on this, even if he feels differently about the assassination? And is Nick being completely honest about Charlie's turn against Israel, still continuing to call him Israel's #1 guy, as he did just last night? Let me know in the comments down below. Like the video, subscribe to the channel, also subscribe to Ian Carroll. Great segment, really like Ian, even though some disagreement in terms of how we look at this. But there you have it. Also, if you like this video and my take, please consider joining underneath the video. If you click the join button, you can become a YouTube member. That will allow you to gain access to all my videos before they go live to the general public on YouTube. You'll be able to watch those members only videos immediately. And also, if you want a free copy of my first book, Compact of the Republic, click the link in the description below. It'll send you off to a website. You just plug in your email. I'll send you the PDF of that book free of charge. No obligation, just because I appreciate you. And until I see you guys next time, no more war, no more debt, no more inflation, and no more empire. Peace out, guys. Catch you in the next one.